Hello and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam, and today I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Matt Collier. Matt, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing good, thank you, Sam. It's nice to have some nice British summer weather. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good. Yeah, the summer weather is certainly nice, but at the same time, wow, it is hot. It is sweltering heat, but we're not here for a weather report. We're here to bring you a review of the Austrian Grand Prix, and a pretty good race it was, but we have to start on the Friday because this was a sprint race weekend. So, qualifying, Matt, what stood out to you?
There was a fair that stood out to me. Vettel last in qualifying. Bit of a surprise. Waddy Joe out in Q1. He's been qualifying P8, P9 in the last three races. Perez being stupid at turn 8 and deleting his lap. And then I think, where did he start? I think he started like 13th in the end. McLaren 15th and 16th in qualifying. You had Mercedes causing two red flags. Last time Lewis crashed in qualifying was Brazil 2017. So it's very, very strange to see Lewis crash out in qualifying. But yeah, they're the main incidents from quali.
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much summed it all up there. It's so weird with the Aston Martins because their race pace just always looks so solid, but they just can't get set up right in qualifying. I mean, we talked about this loads last week, and it's exactly the same. I mean, we complained last week that, maybe it was in the wet, and it's only the wet setups they can't get right. But it was bone dry and they can get it right. So very worrying for them. As you said, McLaren 16th and 15th, pretty poor. A double Mercedes crash, which made Q3 quite spicy. And of course, then Perez demoted to P13, like you said, after exceeding track limits. I think that was the right decision. I know that Joe got onto the messages atting me, like saying, "Oh, Perez demoted. What do you think?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was the right decision." Both Haas and Q3. I mean, not as if it's so weird because at the beginning of the season it was a real big deal, but at this point it's like, well, they're just kind of a team that you never know whether they're going to do. So if they do like awfully, it's not really a surprise. But if they do really well, it's also not really a surprise. So Haas are a bit of a interesting team. And then of course Verstappen put his car on pole with Leclerc second and Sainz third. And now on to the sprint on the Saturday. Same question. What stood out for you in the sprint? Do you think it was a good one?
Yeah, very much enjoyed the sprint. Even before the race began, we had Fernando Alonso with his tyre blanket still on. I was like, there's no way he's started the race with those on. At first, I was like, why is one of the marshals waving yellow flag? And the cameraman panned to Alonso and he still had his tyre blankets on. I think they were trying to reboot something or had some technical issues and just completely forgot about the tyre blankets. And you had, then the formation lap was delayed and then they're about to start and then one of Joe's engine kept cutting out and then we got another formation lap. When the sprint finally started, Gasly just doesn't like these sprints. He's crashed in so many sprint races and got involved in so many incidences. Yeah, so I think he collided with Hamilton and went off at turn 1. I think you had Norris got forced off the track at turn 4. You had a Ferrari battle, which was entertaining. You had Vettel going off in the gravel and the two Hasses trying to park the bus on Hamilton. So yeah, there was plenty to talk about and that was exciting in the sprint.
Yeah, there certainly was plenty. That Alonso did not start was so strange, as you said, because they did just pant him and you're like, why has he got the tire blankets on? Have they just been really stupid? I don't think it's actually come out completely what happened. I don't think a full account has come out. So really, really bizarre. And then you had Joe on the formation lap as well. So it was like the race just didn't want to get started. But Alex Albon had a bit of a nightmare sprint. I mean, first of all, forcing Norris off track, as you said, gaining him a 5-second penalty, but then also being the one that sent Vettel spinning at turn 6. I mean, he didn't get a penalty for that, but it's I don't know. I don't remember how Martin Brundle described it. I think it was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. It was a very 50-50 incident, which I think had been harsh to penalise him. But yeah, he certainly was involved in a lot of the action. And then the finishing grid of the sprint was exactly the same as it started, with Verstappen first, Leclerc second, and Sainz third. And as much as we wanted a battle for the lead with either Leclerc or Sainz trying to put pressure on Verstappen, it was very much a case of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz battling. So the two Ferraris battling, which I think kind of did have a detrimental effect, because if they could have just used each other a bit more to like harvest DRS, then they could have got a bit closer. But yeah, it was plain sailing for Max, to be honest, from lap 1. Now to Sunday, and first of all, Matt, what were your general thoughts on the race? Do you think it was one of the best this season?
Yeah, I think the race was very good. A lot of overtakes. I was surprised at how many overtakes. It was mental. I think at one stage the cars were like 5 wide going into turn 2, I believe. So yeah, a lot happened. There wasn't a safety car or red flag. There was a VSC for Sainz's Ferrari when it blew up. Perez just had a terrible weekend. He did his best Albon impression, trying to go around the outside, and got damaged and then had to retire. That gave Russell a 5-second penalty, and then Russell to change his wing. There are so many track limits. It was mental. I mean, I talked about the FIA up in their strictness, and well, this is a prime example, because almost every few laps there was someone pinging up saying first track limit warning, second track limit warning. You had people get black and white flags, and I think Martin Brundle said like this is the first time that someone's actually got like a 5-second penalty for exploiting the track limits. And yeah, Perez was one of them. Hamilton was over the radio say, am I the only driver getting these? And the engineer wasn't Bono at the time, but the engineer said, no, it's not just you. Yeah, there's so much to talk about. The Ferraris, really, they should have got a 1-2. I think that's fair to say. Sainz's Ferrari, it was weird to see it completely go up in flames. I mean, the flames were quite big, to be honest, and it was on a bit of a slope. So seeing that car roll back, I was like, please don't roll back onto the track. But yeah, going back to your question, I thoroughly enjoyed the race and just the weekend overall.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a race that really had everything, wasn't it? I mean, it had a fight for the lead. You had lots of overtaking. Like, there were so many moves, and like the camera just couldn't keep up. There was just so much going on. You had different strategy. You then had late race heartbreak and a Fernando Alonso finger wag, which, if you're asking a Ferrari engineer, he was doing it to praise Yuki Tsunoda for his great performance. But yeah, it really was a good race, and just so much drama, quite a few incidents without there being too many retirees. And yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was I think I'd rank it second best this season, potentially, after Silverstone. I think it was very, very good. And it shows that you don't need a big crash to have a great race, because a lot of people are like, oh, when there's loads of crashes, entertaining. But this race was great, and you didn't really have any big incidents, which I think is a massive positive and is another example of why the new cars are so great in terms of following and wheel-to-wheel action. So yeah, no, fantastic race on the Sunday. Let's look at the incidents. You've mentioned a few there. So starting on lap 1, you had George Russell spinning Sergio Perez go around the outside of turn 4. And Russell got a 5-second penalty from the FIA for this. Matt, do you think that was fair?
First of all, I think going around the outside turn 4 is very bold anyway. It's not the most ideal place to make an overtake. I think George Russell said it was a little bit harsh, but I do feel like Russell could have given him a slightly bit more room. So I think it was lap 1, wasn't it, this incident? Yeah, so I think it was a bit harsh, but I can understand why they gave him a 5-second penalty because of the consequences which it had with Perez and all the damage. And yeah, Perez ended up DNFing, so I can understand the 5-second penalty.
Yeah, well, as you said, the FIA are lenient with lap 1 incidents, but for me, it was definitely a close decision, to be honest, because they give this leeway to the drivers, and Perez going around the outside of lap 4 always spells trouble. I mean, just last year he got a 5-second penalty for pushing someone else off doing exactly the same thing. So it's tough, but in my opinion, Perez was in front, so Russell, in my opinion, should have potentially yielded. And as much as Perez didn't give him much space, I think that Russell had enough space to potentially get out of the way. So for me, I think a 5-second penalty, despite being potentially harsh, especially on lap 1, was fair. Then on lap 26, you had Perez retire, unfortunately, with the damage he sustained from that. Then on lap 40, Pierre Gasly span Sebastian Vettel going around the outside of turn 4. These drivers need to learn outside of turn 4 is not the move, with Pierre Gasly getting a 5-second penalty. Now, Matt, same kind of incident, 5-second penalty. And do you agree with the decision? Surely this is pretty easy.
Yeah, I do agree with the 5-second penalty. It's turn 4, just don't overtake around the outside. Turn 4, as simple as that.
Yeah, no, it is very risky. I mean, for me, this was miles worse than the Russell and Perez incident, because the thing with the Russell Perez incident was that it was quite close. The cars were quite close together. But when Vettel went around the outside, he left Gasly so much room that I genuinely, I still can't believe that a man who's been in the sport for so long as Pierre Gasly, he's relatively experienced, he knows his way around, would somehow collide with him. I mean, I don't blame Vettel for being annoyed, because people were just smacking into him left, right, and centre this weekend. So, yeah, 5-second penalty, definitely. It was much worse than the Russell one, and it was just so stupid from Gasly, and I don't blame Vettel for being annoyed. Then on lap 52, we had a Nicholas Latifi retirement with a issue. I don't think it's come out yet what that issue was, but he was struggling for the entire race. And we had on lap 56, of course, the incident you mentioned earlier, Carlos Sainz retiring with an engine blowout, which triggered a virtual safety car. And it was a bit frustrating, this incident, because Sainz's car was on fire. I mean, it was quite an explosion. I don't think I've seen something like that for quite a while. And the stewards didn't really help Sainz out of the car as quick as they probably should, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know what you think about this, but bear in mind the car's on fire and he's literally sitting in flames. They really didn't. I mean, you could see Sainz reaching out for a hand and no one just gave it to him. They're concentrating. I mean, there was only one marshal there. The others were just standing there. So I don't know what you thought, but I thought that they probably could have helped him out quicker.
Yeah, it was quite a weird one, because to begin with, the car didn't roll down the hill. The marshal came over and I don't know, he was kind of putting like his glove in front of the front right tire of Sainz's car to try and stop it rolling, which wouldn't achieve anything. Yeah, I felt like the marshals could have been on the scene a bit quicker. Probably someone should have put the fire out quicker and stopped the car from rolling. It was a bit of a weird one. Yeah, I kind of completely agree with what you said, to be honest.
Yeah, it was strange. And then, I mean, these incidents aren't, we're not going to talk about it on laps, but you mentioned earlier how many penalties there were for track limits. You had Pierre Gasly getting 5 seconds, Lando Norris getting 5 seconds, Zhou Guanyu getting 5 seconds, and Sebastian Vettel getting 5 seconds, all for track limits, and the amount of warnings throughout the grid. I mean, I don't know if there's a driver who didn't get a warning, to be honest. It was that crazy. I mean, what do you think about these penalties? Because on one hand, they've had these track limits exactly the same as it's always been. But on the other hand, these new cars make it so hard to see where the track limits really is. I mean, you had drivers complaining about it all the time. So do you think that at a track like Austria, they should be more lenient with the track limits because of the new cars make it just so hard to see where it's on the track, or are rules, there's no need to change it?
I think these track limits that they implemented were very harsh. It's the first time we've been to Austria with these new regulations, is massive 18-inch wheels, and there's quite a lot of elevation changes around Austria. It probably doesn't quite look like it from all the onboards, but yeah, it's kind of quite a few blind corners, and yeah, it kind of just ruins the racing in a way. With all these drivers getting loads of 5-second penalties, you're just like, oh, they're in a battle, but oh, he's he's got a 5-second penalty, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, they're really strict on this. Yeah, so many drivers complained that this was unfair. So yeah, I think they were a bit too strict on this one.
Yeah, it was funny because watching this race, it was almost like watching an F1 esports league race, because the amount of times we've been playing the game, and I mean, no, you're really good at avoiding penalties, but the amount of times I've been playing it and got loads of penalties for track limits and just complained, because it's like, this never happens in F1. No one's got a penalty for years for track limits, and then all of a sudden, everyone's getting warnings, and like 4 drivers get 5-second penalties. So it was so strange. It felt like a league race, but it's a discussion for probably another day, the track limits one, because it is tough. But I guess as drivers get used to it, as get used to the new cars, get used to new regulations, then they'll come more few and far between. And to be fair with track limits, it's not as if it's different for every driver. The track limits are the same for everyone. So everyone's in jeopardy of getting a warning or a penalty. So it's just about having the skill to try and avoid that and using up your penalties to gain an advantage without using your final one. But that wraps up our incident report. And it's time to go team by team, comparing how everyone did this weekend, starting with the team at the top of the constructors, Red Bull, who got 31 points this weekend. So they had Max Verstappen qualifying first, finishing the sprint race in first, but then finishing the race in second with the fastest lap. And then Sergio Perez qualifying 13th, fifth in the sprint race, and DNFing in the main race. Matt, how do you look at Red Bull's weekend? I mean, quite a mixed weekend with a lot of success in one part of the garage, but not a lot in the other.
I think it was a bit of a disaster, to be honest. Verstappen is so good at this track, and he finished second in the main race. Ferrari just looked so much quicker. Leclerc obviously has already taken engine penalties and got loads of fresh components. But then when you look at how quick Carlos Sainz was as well, he hasn't taken anywhere near as many engine penalties as Leclerc. I mean, the track's called the Red Bull Ring, and they didn't win, and only one of them got on the podium. So, yeah, they'll be a little bit concerned of how quick Ferrari were this weekend, and I think it was a bit of a surprise, to be honest, how quick Ferrari were, because this is normally a Red Bull track.
Yeah, well, as you said, it is the Red Bull Ring. And coming into this, I was very expectant for easy 1-2 in the sprint and easy 1-2 in the main race. But to be fair to Ferrari, they did very well and put the pressure on. And for some reason, Max Verstappen had lots of tyre deg in the middle of the race, which I think Christian Horner said they're trying to figure out what happened. But after being so comfortable in the sprint, yeah, the race was a different story. Ferrari really put the pressure on. But at the end of the day, for Verstappen and the drivers, second and fastest lap isn't the end of the world, really. And then with Perez, it was just track limits were a nightmare on the Friday. He had a fantastic race on the Saturday. If you gave out driver of the day for Saturday, it'd definitely have been him, gaining 8 places. And then nothing he could have really done on the Sunday. I mean, he could have potentially left Russell more room and then lived to fight another day. But at the end of the day, it was Russell's fault. And it damaged the car so much he couldn't continue. So very unfortunate for him. But, I mean, Ferrari have gained points, but there's still a gap of 56. Red Bull's still comfortable. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's been a disaster for Red Bull, but I don't think it's been their best weekend, especially at their home race. They will be disappointed, but I don't think it's been a disaster. Now, moving on to Ferrari, they got 38 points this weekend, with Charles Leclerc qualifying second, coming second in the sprint and winning the final race, despite having some problems on the final laps, which made a very exciting end. And then Carlos Sainz, third in qualifying, third in the sprint, to DNFing in the race. What about Ferrari? I mean, up until Sainz's DNF, I just said that Ferrari had a great weekend.
Yeah, I think they would have got a 1-2 over Verstappen. They should have got a 1-2, in my opinion. At Silverstone, they should have got a 1-2, in my opinion. At Austria. But yeah, as I already explained, their car looked really quick. Maybe Sainz was pushing that engine to its absolute limit, which is maybe why it caught fire. But yeah, I think Ferrari will be very pleased with how they've done. It's strange to see they've just somehow gained loads of performance from this weekend. Yeah, I think they'll be very pleased. Obviously, Perez DNFing helps their points in the constructors, and yeah, I think they'll be very pleased how they've done.
Yeah, they certainly will be pleased. Charles Leclerc was just over the moon with his race, but I don't blame him, really. This is the first ever race he's won where he hasn't started on pole, which is great, but it's also a bit of an issue. How is the main title contender to Verstappen only just winning his first race, not from pole? So, I mean, but he won it. He broke that duck today. And as we said throughout the grid, once you've finally done something once, it comes a lot easier, as we're going to talk about a driver like that later. But yeah, it's a solid weekend for Ferrari, but it's worrying that, I mean, if their strategy isn't letting them down, their car is. They just can't get the results that can make them too competitive in the constructors. I mean, it's points gained, but it's pretty minimal points. So, you know, it's tough. It's a good weekend for Ferrari in general, but worrying with their reliability, I think it's fair to say. On to Mercedes now. They got 33 points this weekend, so the second best out of any team. And Well, George Russell has the nickname Mr. Consistent, and that's exactly, I mean, that summed up his weekend, to be honest. He fourth in qualifying, then he was fourth in the sprint race, and then fourth in the real race. It can't get any more consistent than that. And then with Lewis Hamilton, ninth in qualifying, eighth in the sprint, and a podium and third in the real race. I think it's been a really positive weekend for Mercedes, who I don't think expected to get this good a result here.
Yeah, especially after their double red flag in Q3. Yeah, really good weekend, as you said, for Mercedes. Russell fourth in all of the categories. Hamilton struggled in qualifying and the sprint, but still managed to get on the podium. Another podium once again for Hamilton. I think the main weakness of this Mercedes is just simply straight line speed. A prime example of that was Hamilton trying to get past the Hasses. He just really struggled. Russell had a very good recovery drive after dropping, I think, to like P19, having to serve a 5-second penalty and change his wing. I think he should be very pleased with finishing fourth. And yeah, 27 points for the race for Mercedes was very good. And obviously they got more points from the sprint as well. So I think they'll be very pleased.
Yeah, I think they'll certainly be happy. And with Paul Ricard, the next race, they have big expectations for that because they think that track really suits their car. So if they can get fourth and third in a track that doesn't suit their car as well as others, with tracks that do suit their car coming up, could be very positive. We could see Mercedes getting a race win. I mean, we're halfway through the season now and we haven't got one, but to be honest, I'm pretty confident we will as the season draws to a close in 11 races time, I think it is. But yeah, very positive weekend for Mercedes, great recovery drive from Russell. And I think it's Hamilton's third podium in a row, which is very solid. Now on to McLaren, who have a big fight on their hands. They got 8 points this weekend, with Norris qualifying 15th, coming 11th in the sprint and finishing the race in 7th, and then Ricciardo 16th to 12th to 9th. I mean, they definitely improved as the weekend went on, I think it's fair to say. How do you look at McLaren's weekend?
Well, they had a shocker in FP1. Norris caused the red flag and was like last at the time. Ricciardo was like 18th. Well, I mean, McLaren qualified 15th and 16th, and for them to, get 8 points, I think they'll be extremely happy because they looked miles off it in FP1 qualifying. And yeah, Norris had a very good drive the whole weekend. Got a lot of very important points for McLaren, but once again, Alpine slowly catching them. So yeah, a bit of a concern, but good points recovered in the end.
Yeah, definitely good points recovered. And then mentioning Ricciardo as well, P9 finally getting some points. I mean, 2 points isn't much, but it's an improvement. Hopefully he can kick on. But yeah, Norris did fantastic. And without his 5-second penalty for track limits, he could have potentially pushed on and maybe put up a fight with Schumacher. But no, a very good weekend for McLaren, especially, or not a good weekend, but a good Sunday for McLaren after a very poor Friday and an all right Saturday. But the team that is slowly catching them, Alpine, have caught them. They got 14 points in Austria and are level on 81 points in the constructors. You had Fernando Alonso, who qualified 8th, did not start in the sprint, and somehow got P10 in the race after everything just went wrong for him. So ended up stealing a point. and then Esteban Ocon qualifying fifth, sixth in the sprint race, and then fifth in the real race, being very consistent and putting in a great result. How do you look at Alpine? I mean, this is looking like they're going to leave McLaren in the mud if McLaren aren't careful.
Yeah, I felt like Alonso definitely would have got probably sixth, seventh if it wasn't for his tyre blankets and then did not starting in the sprint. Ocon had a really good race. He's looking really consistent at the moment and getting the maximum out of the car. Alonso somehow got 10th and got a point. There's a lot of good overtakes that both Alonso and Ocon did. My favourite one was definitely Alonso going onto the grass to get past Yuki Tsunoda and then waving his finger and then still overtaking him at the same time. I think they'll be pleased with the points they got, but I feel like Alonso definitely could have got more if it wasn't for his problems.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good weekend. I mean, Alonso was just praising Tsunoda. If just ask Binotto, he was praising him for his excellent racecraft. That's what they do. But yeah, fantastic weekend. Bear in mind that Alonso pit twice under the VSC because he had an issue. I think 10th place is very good. And Esteban Ocon is just so consistent. He just picks up results. He doesn't get talked about. He just goes about his business, picks up the points, goes to the next race, picks up the points, and goes under the radar a bit, which I think is unfair because he deserves a lot of plaudits. Fernando Alonso this season, though, it's just been so unlucky. The amount of points he has, he probably should have double that. Just the amount of bad luck he has. But he's still showing, even if he doesn't have the points to show for them, how good a driver he is. And getting P10 here is another example of that. Now onto the first of four teams with 0 points this weekend is Alfa Romeo. First of all, they had Valtteri Bottas, 12th in qualifying, 10th in the sprint, which of course got them no points, and 11th in the race after starting for the pit lane. And then Zhou Guanyu, 18th in qualifying, 14th in the sprint, and 14th in the race. What do you have to say about Alfa Romeo? I mean, just not a great weekend for them, was it?
I think there's 2 words for you to describe them. That is reliability and development. I think it's simple as that. Bottas starting in the pit lane, Zhou having issues on the formation lap, and them not developing their car means other teams are finding more performance. Simple as that, really.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Not a great weekend for Alpha, and they could be caught by Haas if they're not careful. The team we're talking about, I think it was 2 race weeks ago, they were 9th, and they now find themselves in 7th. They've gained a place on Alpha Tauri on 34 points. So this weekend they got 14 with Kevin Magnussen qualifying 6th, 7th in the sprint race, and 8th in the race on Sunday. And then Mick Schumacher going from 7th in qualifying, 9th in the sprint, narrowly missing out. And he was very annoyed after that because he believes that Kevin Magnussen should have let him pass because he felt like the quicker car. But then to finish 6th in the race on Sunday, a superb effort. What do you make of Haas? They are such a weird team.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Uno reverse card. You just kind of don't know what you're going to get with them in terms of performancing, quali, the dry, the wet. It's just it's honestly a mystery, but I think it's very clear they do have good performance in the car. It's just you don't really know what you're going to get with them. Both Hasses did really well this weekend. We already touched upon it with Mick Schumacher. I felt like he was also the fastest Haas in the sprint, and Magnussen didn't kind of cooperate and work with Mick Schumacher as well as I thought he could have. But yeah, both in the points. As you said, they've now gone above AlphaTauri, who are just looking like a mess at the moment. But yeah, Hasselby really pleased, especially with Mick Schumacher and how well he's performing at the moment.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that they got the joint fourth best points this weekend. I mean, they got the same amount of points as Alpine, which just shows how well they're doing. And it looks like Schumacher's kicking on, which is fantastic after his first points in Britain. You mentioned AlphaTauri there. No points this weekend. Pierre Gasly, 10th on Friday, 15th in the sprint after spinning on lap 1, 15th in the real race after just having 5 seconds for track limits and 5 seconds for spinning Vettel. And then Tsunoda had a really anonymous race, 14th in qualifying, 17th in the sprint, 16th in the race. No idea what happened to him. AlphaTauri, they could finish. Oh, I feel like they're pretty set to finish 8th this season.
Yeah, their car just looks terrible. Gasly must be praying and crossing all his fingers and toes that this car is going to be better next season, because Gasly's obviously going to be racing for them next year. But yeah, this car just doesn't have any pace. I mean, even in qualifying in the sprint, they just looked nowhere near the points. And yeah, the fact that Alex Albon finished 12th and someone as good as Pierre Gasly is just finishing way down the order in 15th just kind of shows how awful their car is. And yeah, Tsunoda, he's always got a few mistakes in him. I remember Canada coming out of the pits, just going straight on. So yeah, it's definitely not been the best of weekends for them.
No, I think it's fair to say that they have been pretty poor. Now on to Aston Martin, and starting with Sebastian Vettel. He's 20th in the qualifying session on Friday, DNF in the race on Saturday, and then 17th, which was the last finishing position on Sunday. And then Lance Stroll, 17th to 13th to 13th, which is pretty solid without being outstanding. I mean, how do you look at Aston Martin? Vettel just had the worst weekend.
Yeah, I'm saying it now. I think either Vettel, Hamilton, or Alonso, one of the three, could be more, will retire at the end of the season. Vettel's won multiple world championships, and for him to be qualifying 20th, it's just, yeah, it's really sad to see, to be honest. Alonso's oldest guy on the grid, young prospecting Oscar Piastri coming through, but Alonso's just had loads of bad luck, and Hamilton is yet to win a race this year. He's won a race in all the years he's competed, and we'll have to wait and see if he's in the sport next year. But on to Aston Martin. Yeah, just a poor weekend. I mean, even Alex Albon finished above both the Aston Martins in the race. Yeah, there's not really much else to say. Vettel obviously going in the gravel, Stroll just doing Stroll and finishing 13th. It's not really much else to say.
No, it's an interesting point to bring up there. Which of the three drivers might retire? I would put, if I was going to bet on it, I would put all my chips on Vettel. First of all, he's getting more frustrated by the week with the Aston Martin car. The race pace is all right, but the quali pace has been really poor. Just this weekend, he got fined for walking out of a driver's meeting. because apparently they were going round in circles and he was getting really frustrated and felt like they weren't going anywhere. So that's another thing. And he's spoken out recently about how every day he wakes up and feels like considers retiring from the sport because he feels like a hypocrite campaigning for these environmental things and racing in F1. So I would put all my money on it being Vettel. I have a sneaky feeling, I know not about Aston Martin, that Fernando Alonso will, I don't know when his contract expires, but I think he'll stay for this season. He'll stay for
It's
next season.
sorry, it's 2023.
2023. So yeah, my plan or my idea is still works then. I think he'll stay for this season. I think he will stay at Alpine for 2023. And then I have a feeling that he will take I think he'll take Perez's place in the Red Bull for 2024. I think that Perez's contract runs out in 23, if I'm not mistaken. If it's 24, then Alonso will take the seat in 25. But Alonso has been, I know he's old, but he keeps saying how he could race for years more. He feels fine. He's still getting great performance. And he got offered the Red Bull seat apparently in 2011 and 2013 and was very close to accepting it both times. So he's been offered it before and he's clearly on Red Bull's radar and he wants to win a world championship. So that's my prediction. Anyway, Aston Martin, yeah, Vettel, just rubbish. Not really his fault, but rubbish all the same. And then Stroll just didn't really do anything. He just kind of vibes, though did get arguably one of the overtakes of the weekend on Alonso. So if there was an overtake of the day award, it would probably go to Stroll. And if you got points for that, that would be great, but you don't. You get points for finishing the top 10, and he came 13th. So yeah, that sums up Aston Martin. Final team, Williams. Alex Albon qualified 11th. Very good result for him to be found on the Friday. 16th in the sprint after his penalty with Lando. And 12th on Sunday with Latifi, 19th to 18th to DNF. How do you look at Williams? Will they ever get more than 3 points?
Yeah, they're just so far off the development and ER&D and all that kind of progress. 12th for Albon, still doesn't get points. Latifi DNFing, we don't really know why DNF, so maybe some reliability concerns. And yeah, there's just a huge gap to climb in terms of the constructors' points. I mean, they've only got 3 points, and yeah, it's a massive mountain to climb. Even when they develop their car, they're still not getting points. So yeah, I can't see them finishing anywhere but just plumb last in the constructors.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Haas levels of bad, but I mean, Haas last year, Haas this year, great, but Haas last year were awful, 0 points for the entire season. So it's not that level of bad, but I can't see them finishing anywhere but 10th in the constructors unless Alex Albon all of a sudden just picks up loads of 10th or 9th places and Aston Martin somehow just completely fail. But yeah, Williams, I mean, there's quite a bit of negativity around a few of the teams this weekend, but a few of them are just frustrating to see down the bottom. But anyway, on to a more joyous note. Driver of the day. Matt, who have you gone for?
I've gone with Mick Schumacher. I felt over the whole weekend he was really good. Qualified 7th in qualifying, which was really good for him. Finished the sprint in 9th. Also, we touched upon it, how he was definitely the quicker Haas, and he felt like that Magnussen probably should have let him pass, and then it massively compromised Mick in the sprint, and he ended up finishing sprint in 9th. But then onto the race, he outperformed Kevin Magnussen, kind of showed his true colours, probably kind of spurred him on of what happened in the sprint. Finished 6th, had a really good weekend. Magnussen kind of slipped back a bit. You can kind of see that with Norris finishing above Magnussen. But yeah, really good weekend for Mick Schumacher. Show consistency in all of the sprint, qualifying, in the race. So and also his defense against Hamilton was really good. So that's why I've gone with Mick Schumacher.
Yeah, certainly a worthy candidate. I mean, from criticising him heavily to have 2 Driver of the Day nominations in 2 races, he's really turned it around. A P6 on the Sunday. I still can't get over it, to be honest. 8 points on the Sunday. Wow. Massive respect to him. Great result. I have gone for Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. And the reason for that is that he had a great race. Let's be real. He had a great weekend. He put it in 5th on the Friday qualifying, 6th in the sprint race, and then finishing 5th on the Sunday. He was the only driver not driving for the big 3 to not get lapped. I mean, that counts for something. It's a weird stat, but he did really well on that point. And he was the highest finisher from the teams that aren't Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes as well. He was fantastic. He's been super consistent for Alpine this season. He's put in some fantastic performances. He's a massive reason that Alpine are now level with McLaren in the constructors, because Alonso's had a lot of bad luck this season, so hasn't necessarily picked up the points that he could have potentially have done. But the fact that Alcon's doing so well means that Alpine have 2 fantastic drivers, while McLaren have Norris and Ricciardo's a massive question mark every weekend. Got some points this weekend, but normally a massive question mark. So he's been fantastic this season. He was fantastic this weekend. Not really much to say about him other than the fact he put in a great performance, 5th place, great points, and he is my driver of the day. And that wraps up our podcast reviewing the Austrian Grand Prix. What a fantastic race it was. If you enjoyed this content, remember to like and subscribe. Comment down below who your driver of the day was on audio platforms. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think of our content. If you want to see what we're up to at the Scenario Sun podcast, our links are in our bio with our Instagram, our Twitter, and everything else we've got in there. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.